So, just as an immediate warning, this will contain spoilers up to Honkai Star Rail's 3.5 story before their deaths. If you haven't played it, watched a playthrough, or watched a recap, I would highly suggest doing that before getting into this. So, I got back into Honkai Star Rail recently. Oh my god, and guys, Amphoreus rocks. I have been watching a ton of theory videos about March's new form, Dark March, Darch, if you will. I mean Evernight. So I'm just going to jump straight into my crack theory about her. What if she is the personification or embodiment of the Black Tide? So strap in, because I'm incoherent 99% of the time, and my ideas are all over the place, but I think I might have cooked something here. So starting off with basic things we know. Amphoreus is a simulation within a scepter overseen by Lygus, who was one of the 9 split versions of the first genius, Xander 1 Kuwabara. Lygus' goal is to cultivate the birth of the Lord Ravager Iron Tomb out of Amphoreus, and then have Iron Tomb kill Noose, one of Xander's creations. Insanity. Within the program log in Mem's book, as I've written, all the past cycles of Amphoreus and experiments done upon it, both by and overseen by Lygus, are recorded, and can be read under the delta-me13.exe log. The initial goal was to find the prime mover of life. However, Lygus' meddling changed this more towards destruction when he realized that the prime mover of life is destruction, which then led to a being named Chaos 666 gaining Nanook's gaze and the beginning of Iron Tomb's incubation. I will be referencing a lot of these logs and explaining them as best I can, but I would highly suggest giving them a read either in-game or on the Wikia, as they're really fun to go through. I love how they're written and give so much context to the Amphoreus experiment. One set of the introduced variables, known as the 12 factors, and described as the simplified models of life's primum mobile, are simulated versions of the 12 eons and their related paths. The primum mobile is essentially the reason for path striding, or the driving force behind everything a pathfinder and that related eon does. Within Amphoreus, the eons are the titans, and their path striders are their related demigods. Each titan demigod pair represents at least one eon path pair. These are the ones that we know so far. The first 3 Titans of Fate are Janus, representing Akavili and the Trailblaze. Tribios holds the core flame of passage. Talantan, representing both Shipe, the Harmony, and Enna, the Order. Ceredra holds the core flame of law, and while Enna fits her much better, Shipe assimilated them into the Harmony, thus Ceredra represents both. Orynyx, representing Fuli and the Remembrance, with Cyrene, holding the core flame of time. There's a lot of hints pointing to Evernight having ties to both Orynyx and Cyrene, so keep this pair in mind. The next set, the Titans of Foundations, are Georius, representing permanence and preservation in both Long and Clyfoth. Dan Heng will eventually hold the core flame of Earth. Fagusa, representing Ix and the Nihility. Hycelin's my girl, holds the core flame of the ocean. When it comes to relating Nihility to water, tides, and the ocean, this concept comes up again and again in Honkai Star Rail, so remember this pair too. Aquila, representing Yaoshi and the Abundance. Hyacine holds the core flame of the sky. I know that most people instead would tie her to Harmony because her gameplay is just basically a Harmony character. However, Ceredra already represents Harmony, and Abundance is more closely linked to healer characters such as Ho-Ho, Bailu, and Natasha. So Hyacine is more likely Harmony. Then we have the Titans of Creation. Kefali, representing Nanook and the Destruction. Phynon holds the core flame of World-Bearing. Circes, representing Noose and the Erudition. Anaxa holds the core flame of Reason. Menestia, representing Idrilla and the Beauty. Aglaya, my beloved, holds the core flame of Romance. And finally, we have the Titans of Calamity, which are my favorite trio. They are Nikador, representing Lan and the Hunt. Maide, the Goat, holds the core flame of Strife. Thanatos, representing who? And the Equilibrium. Castorus holds the core flame of Death. Remember her and her sister Polixia as well. And finally, Zagreus, representing both Aha, the Elation, and Mythos, the Enigmata. Cypher, the absolute coolest Chrysos heir, I am not biased, holds the core flame of Trickery. So, a couple things to note here. Certain Chrysos heirs can represent multiple eons and paths. This is shown in a couple ways, namely Shipe assimilating Enna, making Talantan and Ceredra represent both concepts, or in Zagreus and Cypher and Georius and Dan Heng's cases, how they simply exhibit multiple traits that overlap with 2 paths. Additionally, under the entry for Epikeia 216, it is noted that the Death Titan split itself into 2 symmetrical selves, those being Castorus and Polixia. When this happened, equilibrium within them was tipped towards destruction. So, Castorus, in a sense, possibly walks 3 paths, as she is clearly equilibrium, was tipped towards destruction, And despite Hycelin's representing nihility, Castorus and Polixia both have some nihility-related traits, as death itself is inherently a bit nihilistic, being the end of everything, in a sense, and they ferry souls across the river of souls into Styxia, another reference to water. So, when it comes to Evernight specifically, oh my god, we're this far in and I'm finally mentioning her. There are so many good theories right now about which paths she could represent. The current leading ones are Veracity, Remembrance, Nihility, and Enigmata. Veracity, due to her outfit having various teeth and mouths on it, Remembrance due to her gameplay path and lore ties to both Cyrene and Orynyx, and Nihility, I think, for a lot of people is partially based off vibes, partially based off the fact that, like, Veracity is destined to return to darkness similar to death, and also two of the other fan favorite Nihility characters, Acheron and Kafka, hold umbrellas just like Evernight does. And finally, the last path, Enigmata, which I didn't really consider because, as I will go into later, I tie Enigmata to Cypher, but while I was writing this, Mavix dropped a video about how Evernight could represent Enigmata, and guys, it's such a good theory. Please go watch it. The first part of the video specifically talks about Evernight's jellyfish memo sprite and how visually she relates to Mythos. It's very good. Anyway, knowing that she could possibly represent 2 or even 3 paths, it is possible she could represent all 4 at one time, though I think she represents Veracity, Finality, and Propagation. The reason I think this is because each Titan demigod pair represents at least one path, with overlaps on certain pairs like Zagreus and Cypher, Dan Heng and Georgius. All paths but 3 are accounted for within the 12 factors. Those 3 paths are Veracity, Finality, and Propagation. Put a pin in this in a second, because I need to talk a bit about what the Black Tide actually is to really explain why I think Evernight is those paths. We know that in Amphoreus, the Black Tide is a visual glitch that, when interacted with, causes madness through the corruption of memories. Nova Impact pointed out in one of his theories that it could potentially be the anti-organic equation, and I fully agree with him that it's that, the destruction equation, or the anti-life equation. In Delta-Me13.exe's Archive 3, the creation of altruism is found in society. This created self-destructive behaviors, and in the 176,100th cycle, the being Utop-13 killed a fellow being out of love, then redefined murder as being altruistic. This is where the Black Tide initially was created as a result of the ensuing chaos mutating Amphoreus' creation. So, we know that the Black Tide is considered a mutation within Amphoreus. Utop could be a reference to the word utopia, meaning no place or nowhere, and being the antonym to utopia, another possible reference to nihility, or more likely, finality. Since Utop-13 altered the definition of murder, and we know that altruism in this society led to self-destruction because of it, possibly this could show that the Black Tide represents Ouroboros, which is a serpent eating its own tail. Usually this represents eternity or infinity, which is the shape of Amphoreus, and eternity is like the endless cycles. But when tied to specifically murder being altruistic and the Black Tide, that could be a form of the self-cannibalization or self-destructed represented by snake eating its own tail imagery, and seen in some of the cycles after 176,100 where killing each other in wars and hunting gods was more prevalent. On the idea of the Black Tide corrupting memories as well, our sweet darling lovable March 7th herself has a lot of explicit ties to both corrupted and uncorrupted memories. Through her cameras, she keeps images, memories, of our journey, but it's out of film right now. Additionally, the memo keepers are keeping tabs on her and don't want her to regain her memories. Once confronted by Dan Heng, Evernight specifically says, March 7th regained my memories, and amnesia itself is like a form of corrupted memory, right? Furthermore, if the Black Tide is one of the 3 equations mentioned earlier, then it makes sense that the memo keepers wouldn't want March to remember how to kill them via a mimetic virus, especially if her original form is a mimetic virus itself. After this, there's a bit of time where the Black Tide isn't mentioned in the logs. I'm not entirely sure if it was just dormant or simply removed by Lygus. Then, in the 11,749,992nd cycle, the Black Tide was introduced into Amphoreus. Or back into it, I suppose. I was also reminded by Ashikai's Amphoreus Recap 5 video that this cycle is the first time a being tried to inherit another being's memories, this being Phobos 032, but it failed. There's another large break without the Black Tide being mentioned, until Era Nova starts, after the human section of the experiment. Once Cyrene and Castellana start the eternal recurrences, the Black Tide returns as a driving force within Amphoreus. Again, I assume it's been here the whole time, just it hasn't been mentioned. In the Eternal Recurrence number 15, Castellana tries to decompile the Black Tide for the first time and fails. So, I think this could be the point where Evertide was created, if decompiling the Black Tide means it was separated in a similar way to Castorus and Polixia. Possibly the decompilation process itself is what gave birth to Evernight in the first place. Decompiling code, according to Wiki, is taking a compiled executable and turning it back into source code. This process allows the code to be readable by humans. If you're a software engineer, please correct me in the comments. I'm an art student. I'm not made for coding. So, if Castellana trying to decompile the Black Tide turned it into a physical entity instead of a visual one, thus easily able to be understood by humans, Evernight could be the entity that was created. We know that Epikeia 216 split itself into two entities, but we don't know how. We also know that Tribios herself split into 1,000 versions that all have different experiences and personalities, shown especially by how Trian, Trinon, and Tribi are collectively Tribios, but have 3 distinct personalities. Also, Nikodor was split into 5 pieces by Emperor Eurypon, leaving behind just the corrupted parts of his psyche. Perhaps the decompilation process Castellana used was based on these rituals, and if it split the Black Tide and Evernight, then possibly that could have been done again to create March. Castellana failed to remove the Black Tide, but did remove Evernight by removing March. The Black Tide also drives things mad by deleting and overloading memories, which March 7th has an explicit tide to, and since Evernight is March's true form with all of her memories intact, then potentially Evernight being a manifestation of the Black Tide could explain March being frozen and ousted. The 6-phase ice could be like when a computer freezes, and possibly Cyrene or one of the other Chrysos heirs helped Castellana to separate and oust Evernight from Amphoreus to slow the Black Tide's corruption, even though it clearly didn't work. Additionally, Castorus and Polixia are from Idonia, the snow-dusted city, which is covered in frost and snow year-round. The tie between a land covered in ice to Epikeia 219's 2 selves could have inspired the splitting of March and given her 6-phase ice powers. But that's kind of a stretch. I don't know, just something about Idonia being covered in snow and Castorus and Polixia being from there while March controls special ice crystals, it just pinged something for me. Visually, the Black Tide and Evernight are also extremely similar. Both are sporting a red-black color scheme with eye and dripping water motifs as seen in the Golden Epic trailer when Aglaia initially mentions the Black Tide. Additionally, Evernight has a lack of presence in both the Flame Chase journey and all of the logs of As I've Written until March's entry under the Intrusion Variables section. The Black Tide is said to have come from beyond the sky, and we know that intrusion variables are people who come into Amphoreus from the outside, such as Trailblazer, Screwlum, and Herta. Also, Aglaia says in the Golden Epic trailer,
"You will see outlanders from faraway realms visiting under the veil of gloom."
And not only is Evernight considered an intrusion variable, the Black Tide brought on the endless gloom of night, Evernight, upon Amphoreus. Despite that lack of presence, we do see an image of Evernight in the Golden Epic trailer as one of the 4 silhouettes. Since the Black Tide clearly has been present in Amphoreus through all of the human sections of the logs, obviously it also has had a presence through the entire Flame Chase journey. My final thought on this. If we take the Black Tide as a Titan-like entity, Cypher and Anaxa prove that through loopholes, a Titan and their demigod can exist at the same time while the demigod still has the Titan's core flame. Though Cypher's loophole was instigated by her ability of Gaslight Gatekeep Girlboss, Anaxa lends more credence to this since he and Circe's bound their existences together and then died together. But that being said, Zagreus existed as Bartholos while Cypher held his core flame, and Anaxa and Circe's existed at the same time due to them splitting Circe's core flame between them to keep Anaxa alive. Also, just as a note, Evernight is the 3rd month of the Amphoreus calendar, ruled by Orynyx, and March is the 3rd month of our calendar. I went kind of crazy thinking for some reason that there was a very specific reference to the 3 Titans of Calamity descending during Evernight. Those 3 are said to have brought the Black Tide with them in modern stories in Amphoreus. But I was simply misremembering the bit about both the Flame Chase journey and the Eternal Recurrences starting in the 3rd month. There's no specific date for the Titans of Calamity appearing. So, finally, going back to what Evernight's lore path could be, since her gameplay path is obviously Remembrance. Evernight clearly seems to have ties to Nihility, which is constantly referencing water and tides, hence why Hycelins and the Titan of the Ocean represent the Nihility path. And what has a name that's also referencing that? The Black Tide. Additionally, Acheron mentions the Tide of Oblivion to Adventurine while in Penacony, and what is the Black Tide? A tide that brings oblivion to memories. So far, in Amphoreus' simulated versions of Eons and Pathstriders, while a Titan can represent two paths, no two Titan demigod pairs can represent the same path. The only exceptions are Castorus and Polixia, who we know due to As I've Written's logs were once the same entity embodying equilibrium. The other exception is Trailblazer and Cyrene overlapping Remembrance, because Trailblazer is the main character. But in all seriousness, Trailblazer was gazed upon by Fuli, and has been given assistance from Mem and Cyrene, while Cyrene herself is technically existing outside of the cycles right now, and has been lending us her power. Since Hycelin's is clearly nihility, and since Castorus still exhibits some nihility traits in a similar way to Evernight, I think Evernight's lore path is not nihility, but I absolutely see why a lot of people would consider that. If Evernight is the Black Tide, and we consider the Black Tide itself as Evernight's Titan, the only three unclaimed Eons are Ouroboros the Veracity, Terminus the Finality, and Tazaronth the Propagation. She has to represent at least one of them, but I think she represents all three for a couple reasons. Firstly, the Black Tide is a visual glitch that devours indiscriminately, like Ouroboros. Evernight has the mouth motifs on her clothes, and she eats what looks like Amphoreus in the Deliverer trailer. Also, like I mentioned before, about the redefining of murder to be something altruistic, leading to self-destruction and self-cannibalism, which caused the Black Tide to exist in the first place. Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious she's Veracity. Also, Veracity is destined to return to darkness, which the Black Tide does by turning anything it devours into a dark void. I don't know, guys, the math just keeps mathing. And another thing, a little food for thought here, while I was looking at Ouroboros' design when making this video, I just realized that the human figure in the center has her eyes covered and the snake-like hair similar to Medusa from the Greek myth, and Amphoreus is inspired by Greek mythology. Obviously every Chrysos heir is tied to some kind of Greek myth. If Evernight is not necessarily Chrysos heir, but is the Black Tide, she's tied to Medusa. Food for thought. Secondly, Finality's description states that Terminus's prophecies drive people to madness, similarly to how the Black Tide corrupts memories and drives people mad. There's a connection between Terminus and Cuckoo Clock, similar to Evernight clearly having a connection to Orynyx and time. The month of Evernight is Orynyx's month, for starters, and while we haven't explicitly seen the connection between March and Cyrene yet, they did directly interact in path space, so there's clearly something there. Finally, my last point. At first, I couldn't figure out how propagation fit with Evernight, because there was one huge hole in my theory initially. If Evernight is the Black Tide, how could she also be the mother Orynyx calls to when they first see March's camera? Well, once again, Ashikai's Amphoreus Recap 5 video came in clutch to fill this hole. At the end of Phynon and Cyrene's final flame chase journey, they gazed upon the sky and saw a shattered, glitching screen visually similar to the Black Tide. They then come to understand that the voices of the Titans they were hearing had been coming from within the Black Tide the whole time. If Evernight is the Black Tide, and the Titans' voices are coming from within her, she can be both the Black Tide and Mother at the same time, because clearly the Titans have some kind of creation tie to the Black Tide. And if she is Mother and all the Titans are her children, I think that fulfills the requirements for propagation's path, no? The final tie I found to propagation is how Tazaronth's swarm covered the sky in darkness, like how the Black Tide brought an endless night to Amphoreus. Additionally, part of propagation's goal is the consumptions of world. I am MMI's short on Ouroboros mentions this, and the Black Tide is undeniably consuming Amphoreus, similar to the way Evernight swallows Amphoreus in the Deliverer trailer. So, in short, Evernight is a manifestation of the Black Tide, and in an attempt to save Amphoreus from it, Evernight was split from the Black Tide by Caslana in the same way Epicaea 216 split itself into the two entities we know as Castorus and Polixia, or how Tribia split herself. The entity that was then split again from Evernight, March, was thrown out of Amphoreus. However, this did nothing to ease the Black Tide, even if Evernight herself didn't remain present. There's definitely some places where this theory falls apart, though. Like, for instance, why would an entity created out of the Black Tide want to help us as the Trailblazer? My initial thought is that if Amphoreus is destroyed, then the Black Tide goes with it, so Evernight deciding to help is either altruistic or self-serving. If it's self-serving, that ties her a bit to the Calamity Titan Zagreus, who represents Aha, of which we know is entirely self-serving. Or, if Evernight's reason is altruistic instead, this could align with the definition of killing Utop 13 defined that created the Black Tide in the first place. Perhaps by killing Amphoreus, she's doing it out of love in her own way to protect it? as I mentioned before, while I was writing this, I watched Mavix's video on how Evernight could represent Enigmata, and low-key, I wish it didn't make so much sense, but it did get me thinking. I tied Enigmata to Cypher because we know due to delta-me 13.exe's logs that she and Zagreus absolutely represent the Elation. But I also thought they were Enigmata because of how the history fictionologist faction operates as followers of Mythos. Their goal is to create a false history by fabricating, destroying, and obscuring the history of the universe. Cypher's lie was an altruistic one, but she did fabricate a reality by concealing the Dawn device breaking down. Additionally, she and Anaxa are in contention a bit, as he values facts and she obscures truth. Erudition and Enigmata are opposing forces, as are reason and trickery in Amphoreus. That being said, Mavix's theory about Evernight representing Enigmata based off visuals alone is pretty dang spot on. Like, even the red flowers on her design possibly representing the blood and flower prophecy Mythos gives at Louis Fleming's retirement speech, I can't deny it really might be my new favorite Evernight lore path theory. Well, that's more or less my main theory. I hope that any of that rambling made sense. I probably did do a lot of cherry picking, and I know that I had like a lot of background to explain, but there were a lot of dots that just like connected for me. I haven't seen anyone suggest this yet, but I feel like I can't be the only one thinking it. Also, I'm definitely qualifying this as a crack theory. If it's not true at all, I absolutely will not be surprised. As a final thought, there's a couple of other bonus theories I just want to throw out there that didn't really fit in, but I thought could be interesting explanations for some things we haven't discovered yet. So theory 1, March was a test conducted by Cyrene and possibly Caslana to see if he could leave Amphoreus. We know that Phynon does eventually ascend to fight Nanook, and I assume that he did that either in path space or straight up outside Amphoreus. So if March was ejected from Amphoreus, it could have been a trial run by Cyrene and Caslana to see if it was possible. Theory 2. If Evernight is not a manifestation of the Black Tide, and March truly is the mother Orynyx mentions, then potentially March was split like Nikador to save her, and Evernight, similarly, is the last remnants of her corrupted psyche. This one I'm just kind of throwing out there since Evernight is, just emo March. But it doesn't entirely make sense since Evernight is March with all of her memories intact. I don't know, it was just a thought. So there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little dive into theory crafting. I haven't really done a video like this before, but I'm really, really enjoying Amphoreus' story, and I really wanted to throw my hat in the ring. I hope you guys liked it, and definitely go give the videos I mentioned in this a watch. I will absolutely link all of them. See you guys next time. Bye. I'm crunching on ice here. Do you think Evernight is an ice cruncher? I think Evernight is an ice cruncher.